am Kate from Profit with the Planets Financial Astrologer. I want to talk about the upcoming, or maybe we're in a currency crisis. We've just seen the pound. I'm recording this in September 25, 2022, exactly 1 month before this eclipse in October 2022. Often eclipses show up 1 month before, almost exactly. We can give or take a few days on either side. And that's certainly, I believe, where we're at the moment. Now, as I'm recording this, look, the pound has crashed, the markets have started coming down, and certainly that's our eclipse effect coming in as well. I do want to say we have had quite a large set of financial astrology signatures going on at the moment. Probably the most important is the Uranus-Saturn square that's going on, and certainly we are coming right down from the market perspective into that, as well as the eclipse. That's a huge, and we have what's called a Jupiter semi-square Saturn, Uranus semi-square Jupiter. Now they're all huge, some of the most important cyclic, cycle when we put two of these big outer planets together. Now we've also had on Friday, just before this, what we call a GAN seasonal turn date, so the WD GAN method, that on the solstices, the 21st of March, June, September, December, often the markets, we really used to see the June. There used to be always a big crash in around 21st of June. I've seen oil bottom and stuff. It's not a textbook thing, it happens every time. We certainly had that. We had those that follow Shemida, excuse me, I don't know which one to use there. We had this eclipse date and we had these big squares. So we really had it. I mean, it would have almost been impossible for something not to happen last week because all this confluence came in. So yeah, certainly we've seen a lot of activity in the markets, and as I'm recording this, we have really hit these really big, I think it's a deep correction. I don't think it's a crash. I think if you were expecting a crash, deep correction, but if you're trading it, you still got the result, absolutely. So what I want to show you actually is the title of this currency crisis. And looking at the astrology, I was actually expecting a bit of currency headlines, themes. Was I expecting a crisis? Kind of yes. Actually, I was expecting it in about maybe 3-6 months. But I was prepped, ready in a trade for it because I have made no secrets that I've been a US dollar bull. Probably start to saying goodbye to a little bit just based on my personal circumstances. The pound is of interest to me because I have moved to the UK. So what I want to show you is, I did mention on Twitter a couple of weeks back to be looking for currency themes due to this eclipse at 2 degrees Scorpio, October 2022. So I'm going to use an astrology chart. I know not everyone can follow them, but it has a little bit of interesting context based on history. And so what I did is looked at all the sort of same family of eclipses around this early degrees of Scorpio, and the closest one I found was 2014, October 2014. And we allow about 6 months for an eclipse effect to take place, which takes us into that sort of halfway, midway, quarterway of 2015. So we're looking 14, 15. So what I did is I looked at the financial events that were happened back in 14, 15. I'm going to come there in a minute. I want to show you what's going on here. So see Venus here, conjunct this eclipse. And that's where I mentioned we probably have some currency themes coming. Now, this was not enough just looking at this to say to me, okay, well, we'll have currency themes. I really did have to go back and have a look at a bit of history. But I found something really, I guess, a little bit extraordinary or very interesting, which led me to be able to sort of make a bit of a, both a trade and looking at some history of where we may be able to make some predictions. And so what I want to do is show you, so you see you can see Venus here conjunct the eclipse. So looking at the closest eclipse, this is I call it the Greek bailout eclipse because that's exactly what happened. It was around March of 2015, so about 6 months later, because sometimes we don't always see the effects of the eclipse immediately. Certainly in this case we have, but what did we have? Venus conjunct the solar eclipse again. So that was enough to kind of think, okay, this looks really kind of interesting because we're starting to talk recession. Now, back in 2014, that's when they first started to talk recession as well, going into 2015, and that's exactly what happened. A recession started in the US at 2015, and there was a bank run, currency themes, on the euro and Greece, and sort of went into that really intense. If anyone was trading around 2015, you'll probably remember that very well because it was a little bit epic on the markets. Now, interestingly, from memory, 2015 is probably the last serious correction that we had, which pulls me right back to this eclipse, okay? Now, what's also interesting, Saturn at 22 degrees of Scorpio, well, what was the eclipse that brought down the markets this year? 25 degrees of Scorpio. And that's actually quite important when you've got a lot of these sort of outer planets and things happening around the same degree. But this really, so I think we've got a double set of factors here. So when I put them next to each other, have a look. I've got 2014 on the outside, on the inside, and then this is, here we are in 2022. It's exactly like they're both following the same thing. If you know astrology, you can see we had Uranus conjunct the south node, and here we have Uranus conjunct the north node. And also, just probably if you know astrology, look at Saturn and Jupiter. Back both years, they're following the same axis around the same degree, both in opposition there. That's probably a little side bit, but you certainly can't deny. Look at these guys here, so we are absolutely repeating, and this was enough to then go back on these assets to get a bit of a feel for what we thought might happen. So I want to show you some stock charts getting, on this theme of currency crisis. I want to show you what happened in the past around this exact date of October 2014. And it is certainly very interesting. So what do we have here? Now, excuse me, I'm logged in and my ads keep coming up. I don't know why. I don't need to pay for it. I don't need I use my astrology wheel, then I use charts. I don't need expensive charting packages. But look at this. Pound collapsed in 2014. So this was, this is sort of, anyone that knows my work knows I've been extremely bearish on the pound. Now what we want to do with eclipses, there's no use to saying, look, as a teacher, I see there's a lot that someone goes, oh, there's an eclipse in 2014, watch that. As a trader, we have to be well prepped in advance, like at least a month before for this, because often we see eclipse effects the month before. Now your eclipse was actually here. Certainly it's come down into the eclipse, but look, we do have 6 months following. But sometimes, and I'll show you something on another chart, you'll see the effects beforehand. So if you are trading these things, you have to be set and ready, whether using technical support levels and stuff. But there was none. But, look at this huge pound drop. And this is such an immense, set of history repeating. Now, I want to point out now we are in a slightly different set of astrology with inflation. Our Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in early 2022. So some of the stuff I show you is going to look a little different and have separate reactions later. Now, there was only one Scorpio eclipse back in 2014. We certainly have another one coming early 2023, heads up, and we've got another Taurus eclipse coming in November. So those money themes are all here. So what you see here back in 2014 doesn't mean you're going to get a carbon copy repeat, but I want to show the synergy of what happened back then. We are absolutely recreating right now. So you can imagine this was a currency crisis, okay? And this is going into that Greek bailout as well. Okay, so it took everything down with it by the looks of it. If I show you a chart of this is the euro against the US dollar, okay? Look what happened. Same thing. Kaboom. Now I want to point out the euro has really made a massive drop, but as I'm recording this today, we have the Italy elections, and the euro have threatened Italy. Quite interesting. Play it our way, or if you elect the female, you're in big trouble. You certainly may get in. I have reached out to someone who has some very interesting Euro astrology I want to interview for that, so hopefully they'll say yes to that, and I can do that very soon. Looking very much further ahead, because we want with astrology do it for planning particularly as well, or obviously if you're a trader, you can set these things up, long day options and stuff. Don't play with options if you're new to trading. It is the fastest way to lose money, FYI. Do not recommend it. Only people at very high level trading after like a decade should be using options anyway, particularly. But so there is some interesting astrology coming later, but look at this. So here we have the euro collapse. Now obviously the euro's collapsed because we had the Greek bailout, okay? But bearish, here's another currency. So this was the main currency crisis, okay? Bit of a collapse here, I guess we would say. Looking at, I'll show you oil is quite interesting as well, because we've had this huge run in oil in our inflationary Jupiter Neptune, and I guess on a personal level, I got really tired of filling up my car at an insane amount of money in Europe. So I was hoping for a bit of a pullback in oil, and oil does set a quite interesting story in the markets. Again, different astrology, but we've just had a massive oil pullback after that huge run. So taking a look at a bit of oil, I expected oil to pull back here a little bit as well. Now, this is where things get a little different, and I think a lot of people want the answer to this. King dollar, look at that. history repeating. Now, see this little pullback, interestingly, came 29th of September. It pulled back 1 month into the eclipse. Will that happen again? Possibly, because there's actually, what's interesting, because when you've got these eclipses so close to each other by what we say degree, using that astrology chart method, whatever the eclipse hit on a chart, there'd be Saturn or Pluto or whatever, it has to be, in this case, there was a Saturn connection. It's going to happen again, but it depends if we can look at a chart called a progressed chart. You will get slightly different setups. I wouldn't write off a little, not financial advice, I would not write off a little pullback on the dollar here. Certainly that's what I'm looking at, but it just went up, 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 up. Again, we've got different set of astrology now, inflation, all that sort of stuff. But, here comes the dollar up, keep going. So, we do need more than just this. I think the US has its own separate set. It will be my forecast of astrology coming 2023. But certainly the dollar was stood out against all the other currencies as the one currency was strong in 2014. And where are we right now? We have exactly repeated history. There's absolutely no sort of surprises, and there's a big crash coming into the Scorpio eclipse in 2014. I would guess a deep correction. Here we have come even down. Look, so this is what we call the 200-day weekly MA support. The markets dropped far past support, okay? We are in a pretty hotbed here, and we have hit these important levels. So there's your eclipse, and the drop came before. Now this market has bounced out of here. What I want to put, the Pluto moving to 0 Aquarius in April 2023 is one of the biggest astrology transits, astrology, financial astrology, whatever. We're going to see a lot of stuff. But in this case, the market's bounced out pretty hard. But a Scorpio is what we call a fixed sign, and we have some history of the old teachers have taught us that usually the markets come down into this sort of Scorpio eclipses. Bear in mind we have another Taurus eclipse and another Scorpio eclipse coming, but to look at it, what will we think might happen? We've again, so when we take in context of where our market support was, this was a pretty deep pullback, okay? We're looking at about 2,000 odd points on the Dow. Yeah, about 2,000, which, at these levels of 18,000, sorry, that's a pretty deep pullback. That's over 10%. So again, we have recreated history. So I find it personally, now also just bear in mind, this is the US markets, and that was our really big correction there. I think we need to use a different set of astrology for here, but this was a big one. And I think anyone that was trading will remember 2015, because that's the last serious correction we have. Will we repeat it? Yeah, I don't like some of the astrology next year. It will be in my forecast. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, so look, that's a little bit of where I think we are, or why we are in this current currency crisis. Is there more to come on the pound? Probably. I do have an article on my blog, profitwiththeplanets.com, if you'd like to read it. I wrote it back in April. I think the cable was about, which is, for those that don't know, the cable trade is the GBP USD. It's just called cable. So you might see that word thrown around a lot. Back in, I think it was about April, thinking the pound looked pretty rough. Could we repeat this? Very possibly. Interesting targets around, and then looking at the dollar, there's some interesting targets with that. They certainly could add up here. I always want to follow the support levels, the resistance levels, and overcrowded trades. So the US dollar is getting overcrowded, and it would make sense for a pullback, but then we maybe will resume the trend. And even here you can see this was the eclipse here. Actually on this date, it literally just pounded down. But then don't forget, eclipses last. It's not a matter of just here they are done. They have a long lasting effect. Not all of them, but solars, particularly on the themes. The markets you often, sometimes you'll get months and months, but the markets you'll often get like a deep correction back out, and these stories go on for a lot longer. So that is a little astrology on the current currency crisis, and why there are no surprises, because we absolutely were expecting this to happen. So I hope that's of interest to some. I found it very, very interesting, and good luck with your trading.